We're live here. Good evening, everybody. Scott Stevens on Another Perspective as we come to the 50th episode of this first season. It'll be the last one I do for a couple of weeks. We'll talk about it at the end of the show, but just to give you a little bit of a heads up, probably the first Monday at the beginning of the year, we'll launch this up once again. Just some things I got to take care of that we're going to keep me away from being here on this regular schedule. So just a bit of a heads up for that. All right, here we are, standing 2 weeks after an election. The nation not holding its breath. I mean, because it's been 2 weeks, for goodness sakes. The excitement of that is already gone and done. Now it's just waiting it out as the two sides, one holds on to the lead and the other tries to figure out what went wrong, where the votes are being counted, and so forth and so on. So we're kind of not at a loggerheads, but we're still doing maneuvering. Hey, Vicky, good to see you on there on this evening. And it doesn't seem to matter exactly when I start to prepare for these things. There's always details that need to come together towards the end. It's just kind of crazy. All right, sports, you can go first. I'll do weather last. All right, here we go. Let's do this and just call it, where is happiness found? Where do we find our happiness? The Build Back Better agenda aims to rescue the planet from us, the human virus. But with literally everything we have lived for at risk of loss, where do we go? Where is happiness to be found? And this may be the generational question for what is about to unfold across planet Earth and humanity in total. So unimaginable changes are nearly upon us. All of us. No one will escape the Great Reset, and this is by design. So in an effort to rescue the planet from ourselves, most rights, liberties, freedoms, legal protections, and so many other aspects of life in this society that we have been raised, grown accustomed to, and was handed down to us for generations. Back to the Magna Carta, I believe in 1218, those kinds of rights going back many, many centuries are on the cusp of being withdrawn from humanity. So these legal protections may be gone, and rather soon. So of course this is all for the better good. Individual liberties will have to be surrendered to the powers that be so that the many, or those that remain, will have a better life. But can we be happy inside, living inside this new regime? Is that a possibility? So this is what I'm concerned about, and I see us at this cusp where this Build Back Better mantra has been rolled out across all continents through so many, I guess the best way to put it is the neoliberal governments. And that is a society, a way of doing economic business that has been in power for some time. So where are we going to find our peace, our happiness as this thing unfolds? And the question, I suppose, that remains is, will we survive the purge? Because ultimately, if 14 or 15 of us have to be dealt with, then that leaves very few left behind. And so division has been the tool to enable this to show up. Division and anger and angst and poverty, engineered poverty that didn't have to be there. You remove people from their ability to feed themselves, sustain themselves, have a life. And then you create a dependency, and there becomes a resentment, and this whole other cascade of issues just comes to the surface because it has to. It's human nature. And those that are fomenting the anger, that construct of society not able to get along, not able to come into agreement, is by design. And this is where we need to learn to stand above and to see, so we have one side ready to kick the pants out of the president, the person in the office, and the other say, hey, but I won. The news said I won. So we have both sides using the same memes, the same agenda of separation. So we've had the tech giants sitting in Congress. Did I skip a slide? Yeah, I kind of did. Getting grilled by senators, I believe it was this time. And we have them. And if you're rich, if you've got billions, what do you do with it? You engineer a society to your liking. That's what foundations are for. So you can avoid the responsibilities of taxes And then you can use that foundation as a political action committee, as a political action vehicle, a tool to move your agenda forward sans borders. You can have an American foundation and it can do work around the world. So we have Zuckerberg, if you will, who, interesting family lineage, if you're interested to go look into that. It's truly a fascinating read. And so his company able to then manipulate public discourse and then funding election runoff situations. What was this whole thing with Russia for the previous 4 years? Election engineering. And here we are, these same people censoring, if you will, funding one side of an election output. And then the other is Dominion voting. Voting systems not PCI compliant and failed 10 of 12 requirements. And the history of Dominion is also just as fascinating, if not scary, because it is used in so many jurisdictions, not just stateside. And then where is their data center hub? Europe. You could be in Europe, you could be in Frankfurt specifically, and watch elections in Ohio in real time. Who has access to the vote? So 2 weeks on, the election drama continues. Massive evidence of fraud continues to mount. Affidavits, eyewitnesses, by the boatload this evidence mounts. So if this election stands, by design, it will be the end of the republic. By design, it will be the end of the republic. It should have happened 4 years ago, but we had a card played that allowed a 4-year delay. America's government is the only one presently that is out of alignment with the globalists' Build Back Better plans. And we've talked about that for a couple of shows consecutive now because I sense it is so important, and that inflection point of where this Build Back Better, what it truly means and how it has been presented to us for months in the banners, in the logos and so forth and so on. And so the president's saying not too long ago, the future doesn't belong to the globalists. He got us out of the TPP, that Trans-Pacific Partnership, whereupon property rights and things, medicine, for example, how long a company can hold a patent to a medicine before it ends up on the open market and can be used as a generic. You extend that from 7 years to 70 years, and what kind of profits can be maintained by those companies, to where Walt Disney can then hold Mickey the Mouse for 200 years instead of 70 years. So we're extending this right of ownership property, but at the same time, taking away your property, your rights, your liberty. So it truly becomes a two-tiered system under which we would live. One for them and truly one for us. So Gateway Pundit, a fascinating read. It's definitely one side of the agenda, but if you don't read them both, you're not getting the whole story. So if the fix remains in, we know who will be the 46th president and probably the 47th. And my anticipation is that the one that was elected will serve for mere months, if not just weeks. All right, so the 4 a.m. talking points are time to heal. And you can see that laid out across all of the media properties. When you have 6 properties, 6 entities, 6 organizations, 6 corporate structures owning 90% of the media in the United States, and in many ways they've got their overseas properties as well, but they're telling us it's time to heal. Really. So rest assured that our leaders in the White House will wake up every day ready to fight for us, just work for us. We've had enough fighting, enough. All right, Economic Forum. And this is where having a compliant American government is a requirement for the globalists. It is a requirement that America follows along, that we fall in line, that agenda that has been in play for the better part of 10 years with the Rockefellers, Operation Lockstep. They don't choose these names, these operations, willy-nilly. They're very descriptive and telltale of what is underway. So, World Economic Forum, and this video has been around. They've had it out since at least a minimum of September. We just had, I want to say Justin Timberlake, but Justin Trudeau from Canada telling that Canada is willing to participate in this. And so that's just the neighbor to the north. I need to hear what Mexico has to say about this, since they're not part of the Five Eyes organization. So The tagline is, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. And this brings it back to where I wanted to take this show. What does it take to be happy? We, in many ways, in a materialistic society, in a very commercially oriented society, have associated our individual happiness with our possessions. You're happy when you drink that Coca-Cola. You're happy when you take a break and go to McDonald's. You're happy when you're walking out of Best Buy with that new purchase. You're happy when you come home with a new product. And in many ways, that is a sad example of how degenerated society has become, to where the possession of outside objects becomes our reasons or our reason to be happy. Maybe it's looking pretty. Maybe it's a new color in the hair, the new lipstick, no wrinkles, not having indigestion. Reasons to be happy. But that's where we are. We're down to bodily conditions and outside possessions. Those things we have been sold by the hundreds of thousands of commercials and impressions, whether they're ads on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, NBC, CBS, CNN, New York Times, so forth and so on. Those entities survive, not by subscription, but by selling you happiness. You create an emotional, distressing situation that only the spending of your money can solve. You need to be manscaped so you can be happy. That's how far down we have become. So, I should finish this. If we own nothing, if we can own nothing, then what is there to work for? What of families, cultures, heritage? What will inspire, motivate us to imagine and then create? If we own nothing, if we can own nothing, what are we creating? What are we living for? Think about that. That's how serious this situation is becoming. What will be taken from all of us to leave us with nothing? And if their agenda is by 2030, in a decade, we will collectively ask, was it worth it? Art. I like that, Vicky. Art. Own nothing and be happy. The Great Reset's vision of the future. And this from The Guardian. The World Economic Forum video tells us about the plans for humanity in the year 2030. And there's the author. Identity and meaning. What will happen to our social and personal identities? You know, it has to be eradicated in the quest to commodify and standardize human behavior in everything we do. And this, in my eyes, is why the genders have become more fluid. Granted, there is an opportunity for souls coming in to this creation, to this planet, in this date and time, for challenging experiences, because how do we grow? How do we mature? How do we evolve physically as a species, but more importantly, spiritually, if we're not challenged? If life is easy, we do nothing. And if we do nothing, what was the purpose? What was the point of the experience? The experience has a reason, and that is to evolve, to grow, to become stronger, to be wiser, to see through the illusions that kept us happy in the past. So the billionaire class who are pushing this agenda think they can own nature because this, in their eyes, is what they are saving. They own nature and all humans and can control both, whether through geoengineering the atmosphere, for example, genetically modifying soil microbes, or doing a better job than nature by producing biosynthesized fake food in the lab, which still requires a protein to feed it. Where does that protein grow? What source provides that protein to feed the lab food? We have to go back to the source. They think they can bring history to a close and reinvent the wheel by reshaping it to reshape what it means to be human. And hence one of the reasons why transhumanism has become a hot topic. It is difficult, at least on my Netflix and Amazon Prime streaming, to not find a show where there is not some storyline wherein technology, artificial implants, have aided, assisted, improved upon humanity's position. Because to be just plain human is boring. Now you've got to be a superhero. Now you've got to have a gift. Now you have to have an implant. Now you've got to be activated. And this is what the next 2 decades will bring, is transhumanism. And what part of you will be left behind? What part will the technology muscle on in, and will we become dependent upon? And in some ways, when you become dependent upon that which you weren't born with, it becomes a weakness until it's an asset, or it's an asset until it becomes a weakness is probably the better way to speak it. But that is a big part of the agenda. So the idea is that we lose our religion and our spirituality, that personal relationship with that always sustains us and is with us every moment. Our history. Already statues in anger are being taken down. If they're going to be taken down, then they need to go into a museum like the Smithsonian, like the Air and Space, old relics from the past, but they still have a story, and there was a reason why those statues went up in the locations that they did. That story never loses its relevance. It never loses its importance, because humanity, generation after generation, is faced with these same challenges. Sometimes from generation to generation, the test is more subtle. And that signifies an evolution rather than being a very gross example of slavery, for example, or racism. Because we live in the physical, because we have individual personalities and existences and bodies and individuality, that should become the richness in life, not the curse of life. Sameness is not a gift. Sameness is fine when you're at the end of the journey and you're trying to get through the narrow gate back to God, if you will. Then you want to be like that. But you will still take your experiences, your treasure, your wisdom back with you and say, thank you for the journey. It has served you and me well. All right, what we'll actually lose is that history. Yes, access to farmland and sustainable lifestyles, because the planet needs to be healed. So this 8 million acre tract is not to be touched. We can walk above it. We may have Jetsons like tech, and we can look down on it, but we will not be able to farm it. Privacy is the big thing. I think inevitably privacy, if not, it will go very, very quick. Good evening to see you guys coming on there. Vicky, Stephen, Pagan Tree, and Ryan, you the man. State education, we're nearly there. The Rockefellers ensured that we ended up with the Department of Education. I suppose that was Jimmy Carter in the 70s that did the Department of Energy and Department of Education. And where are we in the intervening 40 years? Are we smarter? Are we better off? Are we wiser? Are the kids leaving high school with a greater wisdom than they had in the 70s? And I would imagine that becomes a resounding, if not unanimous, no. But it depends on what the end goal was. Did you want a smarter graduate? Did you just want a worker that could follow instructions? And that depends on goals. What are your goals? What are your desires when you set up these structures upon which education is to be disseminated to all 50 states? If I had my way, the DOE would go away. In 1 year, banned. Let the states return the responsibility of educating their students back to the states. Let there be competition. Let those teachers end up in those school districts and in those states upon which education is valued. And we would see in 20 years, and certainly in 40 years' time, which processes, which systems work, which districts would then be just generating and churning through and bringing to the world and presenting the world, look, the class of 2020, look at their brilliance and what they bring in the next 30, 40, 50 years to the planet, to the workforce, and let their imagination and their potentials flourish, rather than being common cord down. Healthcare. Society is diseased in so many ways. Again, get rid of the Department of Health and Human Services. Rejigger the FDA, the National Institutes of Health. All of these structures are not there for our well-being. By design and by agenda, it is to encourage, sustain, support the sick care industry. Do you think that's going to change with the Great Reset? Or will there be so little money out there, so little resources available to do $150,000 chemo treatments that we go back to, say, hemp oils, or we go to a more alkaline pH diet and deal with cancers that way? That sugar won't be so cheap that and vegetable oils that we can rechange how we feed ourselves? Or will it all just come out of a lab? How about freedom of movement? Will we be free to move when there are fewer of us? Or will there be just small corridors upon which maglev trains travel and no one leaves the way, and it truly becomes you're in a city and you're walled in and a Hunger Games kind of situation? Would that make us happy? What about reproductive rights? Do we go back to the one-child scenario, much like China, to bring the population down, or at least to control it? Ownership of money. If we own nothing and we're given assignments, are we then just fed, sheltered, housed? In many ways, that sounds like a prison life to me. That's what it sounds like. You become prisoners of circumstance. Prisoners because you don't have the resources to move about the planet. There was an airline that talked about that. You've got a ticket. You can move about the planet. And travel, aircraft travel has become so cheap. Never has it been so affordable to go from New York to Hong Kong, from Hong Kong to Sydney, from Sydney to Dubai, from Dubai to New Delhi, from New Delhi to Kathmandu, from Kathmandu to Beijing, Beijing to Anchorage, Anchorage to Mexico City to Rio de Janeiro. We could do that. Cape Town was a possibility. You didn't take 3 months on a ship docking along the west coast of Africa to go see Cape Town. That might be gone. And maybe that's what's happening now with these COVID lockdown restrictions, that our ability to move around the world is a memory by design. Does that make you happy? Peace of mind. The one thing that brings a person peace of mind is knowing what's going to happen, knowing what the future is going to deliver you, knowing that you're secure in your home, secure with your family. But if this kind of agenda is afoot, most of these are going to have to be revisited. All right, if we go back to 1950s to continue the Guardian article, it is interesting to note Union Carbide's corporate narrative based upon a series of images that depicted the company as a hand of God, coming out of the sky to solve some of the issues facing humanity. One of the most famous images of the hand pouring the firm's agrochemicals on Indian soils as if traditional farming practices were somehow backward. I find it. I'll just tell you a story. I was in Puerto Rico about a year ago and had YouTube on a tab or something, and ended up going to the back of the place I was staying. I hear it begin playing. I'm like, what's going on? So I walk back up to the front of the house, look at the computer, and this YouTube video is playing. And it talked about what is called the Savory Institute. And it is a man who lived in Zimbabwe. And through his life experience, being a full-time, born and raised in Africa, seeing how traditional grazing has devastated the landscape. And I don't remember now because there's been a little bit how he realized that there were ways to raise grazing animals, be they sheep, be they cattle, so forth and so on. But what you do is you pen them in. You hold them in a tiny space, and what happens is there's a concentration of dung and manure. And what that does is it refertilizes the soil. And the better part, the bigger part, that's my animal right back there. That is Mr. Comet, apparently thinking he's seeing something. But what that does is if the animals don't eat the vegetation, it sits there in the field and oxidizes. Much like in the western U.S. where I am, what we have are animals climbing in BLM land, on Forest Service land, and grazing. But if that land isn't grazed in 1 year's time, that vegetation oxidizes and the animals won't touch it. So what you have to do is force the animals to consume what is green in that location then and there. And then having those grazing animals, much like the bison of decades past, keeping the plains fertile and using their hooves and so forth to turn the soil and to press in the seeds. It just works. So back to the story. Despite well-publicized claims to the contrary, this chemical-driven approach did not lead to higher food production, according to the paper New Histories of the Green Revolution. And this is what we were promised in the 70s, is this new green revolution would revolutionize agriculture, monoculture. And we have learned in the intervening 40 years that this is not the case. And even now, these companies recognize there are weaknesses inside this model that we've been using. In the book Food and Cultural Studies, Bob Ashley et al., we see some time ago that Coca-Cola TV ads sold its product to an audience which associated the modern lifestyle with a sugary drink and depicted ancient Aboriginal beliefs as harmful, ignorant, and outdated. Right now, that kind of commercial would not likely pass the screening room at Coke's headquarters in Atlanta. It just wouldn't happen. All right, another one. The Great Reset includes farmerless farms being manned by driverless machines, monitored by drones above, and doused with chemicals to produce commodity crops from patented GM seeds for industrial biomatter. This is important. Biomatter. To be processed and constituted into something resembling food. What will happen to farmers? Without farmers, no nation could stand more than a year. Wouldn't happen. That food has got to be regenerated, regrown, tender, loving, cared, and then sold or shared within the community or the nearby city. Now we can ship it, because travel has never been so cheap, grapes from Chile to America, apples from China to Washington State. Believe it or not. Travel is just that cheap. Pre-COVID, the World Bank talks about helping countries get back on track in return for structural reforms. Are tens of millions of smallholder farmers entitled or to be enticed from their land in return for individual debt relief and universal basic income? It's crazy, because this is the carrot out in front of all of us, is universal basic income, a guaranteed floor underneath our income level. The displacement of these farmers and the subsequent destruction of rural communities and their cultures was something the Gates Foundation once called for and cynically termed land mobility. We know that some of these farmers' banking institutions have indebted the farmers with the sole purpose of bankrupting them. And then their buddies, their corporate farmers, can come in and buy these farms at auction. Farms that have been in families for generations since homesteading, and then was open to large animals grazing prior to that. That is the cycle. Every generation, there is an agenda at play. Cut through the euphemisms, and it is clear that Bill Gates and the other incredibly rich individuals behind the Great Reset, it is an old-fashioned colonialist who supports the time-honored dispositive strategies of imperialism, whether this involves mining, appropriating and commodifying farmer knowledge, accelerating the transfer of search and seeds to corporations, or facilitating intellectual property piracy and seed monopolies created through intellectual property laws and seed regulations. The next step in this other Union Carbide commercial is the adding of parts. It becomes the transhumanism. All right, with the link completely severed between food production, nature, and culturally embedded beliefs that give meaning to the expression of life, we'll be left with the individual human who exists on lab-based food, who is resilient on income from the state, and who is stripped to satisfying productive endeavor and genuine self-fulfillment. This is my question. What will bring us happiness? When we have been told there are programs and properties and speakers and gurus out there telling you don't need things to be happy, that is to be found inside. That, at one level, absolutely is true, especially in principle. In practice, it might be a little more difficult. Certainly living in this society, which values things. All right, so what is right is not always popular, and what is popular is not always right. So we're kind of back at an election where the globalists are really struggling to maintain this, because if we can get the U.S. to fall into their hands, then this agenda will roll out with lightning speed. And that concerns me just a wee bit. And there's also a point in life when you realize that nothing will ever be the same. And you also realize that from now on, time will be divided into two parts, before this and after this. So I ask, can happiness be found in just accepting what is to come? Is there a responsibility to resist? Is there a responsibility to resist, or is this just the divine hand swinging the ever-moving pendulum back and forth, back and forth? And must we be okay with these changes that are afoot? What of these nations whose government is in deep and complete alignment with this? The mass protests in Berlin in the last 24 hours are inspiring, as they stand like the Chinese did in Tiananmen Square in early summer 1989 against the tank. But this time in Germany, it was tens of thousands standing against the water cannons in the cold of a November afternoon in Berlin and saying, we resist. We will not be locked down. We will not. They have to resist. So, from Alice in Wonderland, if I had a world of my own, everything would be nonsense. Nothing would be what it is, because everything would be what it isn't. And contrary-wise, what is, it wouldn't be. And what it wouldn't be, it would. You see? Are you confused? I'm kind of confused, honestly. So happiness is a choice, not a result. Nothing outside of you will make you happy. We've been told that over and over and over. And it doesn't matter what you go shopping for. It doesn't. It brings a little bit of pleasure, but pleasure is far from happiness. You must choose to be happy, feel grateful, and then share with the world. So might everything that happens just be a test, I ask. A test where we must entertain that positive attitude, that view that the world will forever be chaotic and chock full of lessons delivered each and every day for each and every one of us. What makes us happy? All right, this is kind of the big thing, as we're all sensing, all seeing, and at this point we all know we're watching you. Everything you do through every little device, every little bit of opening. What kind of concerns me, and Vicki had Tamara McCleary on one of her shows back, I believe in May, about how evolved AI is. AI that can in so many ways think for itself, make decisions, and act upon those decisions depending on the data available to the algorithm. And more importantly, the goals set out for that algorithm to accomplish. The nanny state, just by how it treats us, will evoke a state of revolt in my core. I cannot allow that to happen. It will evoke a state of revolt, resistance, and ultimately distrust. It will forever be distrusted because of the long-standing fraudulent use of the election system. Much like we've had 4 years with people saying, not my president, when it becomes known after the next one is inaugurated, and if the election is stolen, then that mantra, not my president, will go on. You can easily judge the character of a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. How does the leadership, the elite class treat you? How do they treat your children? Do they respect you, or are you simply property? And if we are living under admiralty law and the gold fringe on the flags declares it so, then we land with our footstep on our birth certificates, and we are cattle. We are in a corral We are worked, we are herded, we are birthed, we are milked, we are products to extract value from. So we have two societies. There is a fork in the road. Either there is a wholesale change in the governance of this planet because this problem is certainly not unique to the United States, but to everyone. How are you treated? And for each one, it's different. Each one of us have had a different experience, but frankly, there's a harmony, a melody in how we as people are treated by those who stand in authority, or we have given authority to because of the election process karmically, that we give it away. We give that power away through that process. And that becomes a cause and effect relationship. And nothing stays forever, good as well as bad. Times go away. Be happy. But these cycles are long-standing cycles. If the Magna Carta is now 800 years old, the fight, the redress for rights to be heard by authority, by your king, had been standing for centuries. And with the Pope behind the king also exerting its influence on the royalties along those kings and queens of Europe to get the Magna Carta signed, along with some of these other basic human rights, those were fought for. And if we look and say that nothing stays forever, maybe those rights, maybe it's time for them to go. All right, immature thinking or mature thinking. And there was another graphic a couple of shows back. Feed me or let me work for my food. The two different attitudes. Immature thinking, I deserve, I'm entitled. Pay my bills. Take care of me. Don't offend me. It's really all about me, me, me. Mature thinking, I must learn. It's all about others. Challenge my views. Please question me. I will buy my own stuff. Nobody owes me anything. And I'm responsible for my own success. And we have a scale on this planet and probably through all of creation where there is a gray shade of people populating the whole scale between these two different ways of thinking, these two ways of approaching a problem, approaching life, approaching relationships with one another, developing. Some give, some take. Some always take, and some can't help but give of themselves in every situation. It's just how it is, and so you learn fairly quickly which kind of person you're dealing with. So detachment is not that you should own nothing, but nothing should own you. And maybe those things that we allow own us are just states of being, conditions of consciousness, points of view, things in the past that we can't let go of. Those kind of things would fall in this list as well. Nothing should own you. All right, together, obviously, you would think, we're together, stronger together. Color, sex, creeds, ages, education levels, we're all at different places on this scale. And always will be. That's the point. We're not all supposed to be the same. Never, never, never. How boring would that be? You send 12 people in a space capsule off to Jupiter. Takes a year and a half to get there, and they're all identical. That's going to be a tough journey, just as it would be if they're all on each end of that spectrum. But either way, there's going to be a lesson to be learned by all 12 participants. Just like on Earth today, with all 7+ billion people, there are lessons being learned. And there's also rewards coming to those, and there are also penalties, restrictions, burdens being levied because of previous actions. Division has always been their most potent tool. It has worked across every single time, across every single generation. They have kept us divided. They is a topic for another show. But only when we are united will elections not matter, because all candidates will have the people's best interest at the forefront of their discussion every single time. And if that's the case, you will understand that to be the situation during an election, during a campaign. It would be clear and uplifting. No matter which person you listen to, you would be inspired and you would want to vote for them. And then the differences would be very, very subtle between the two platforms, or 3 platforms, or 4 platforms. Who says that elections have to be restricted to just 2 limited points of view? So be thankful for what you have, says Oprah. You'll end up having more. If you concentrate on what you don't have, you will never, never have enough. Because you're focusing on poverty. It must grow. If you're grateful for what you have, then that situation, that happiness, allows more to arrive. Again, a principle. It is what it is. Who's to complain about what it is? And maybe that's the end of this spiritual journey. That God is nothing more than that, what, or that which, what is. It just is. And with that, then that point of view that that is wrong or that is wrong does not own you. You can stand above the chaos below and say it just is. That I'm guided. I can be where I need to be in a particular situation. And in that peace that you would find, that happiness that you would live in, then that still small voice can whisper to you, and you can be where you need to be to experience that which is. All right, for a couple of weeks, I'm going to be out of here. That's my mom and dad. Mom's struggling right now, and she's probably towards the latter part of her life. So this was Christmas 5 years ago, and it was truly the last time, one of the last times I saw her. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break. We'll be back with the show on the first Monday of the new year. But it's time to spend a little time with Mom. So that's where we are. All right, Vicky's Coffee Break Show, weekdays 11 o'clock Mountain. Tracy's Unlocked Show, 5 o'clock on Tuesdays, Thursdays Mountain Time. And then I'll be back on the Monday following the new year. All right, it's quite something else quoting some of these shows. Let's hit some of these comments here. Global governance is here to stay, says Mike. Our anthropogenic emissions are off the chart. Arctic is caving for all atmospheric breathers, including the kings and queens. They know it. There's a plan. And regardless of what happens to temperatures, there's really nothing you and I can do about that. We're just ants crawling across the sand pile, moving little bits of sand here and there. That's it. If they think they can engineer the climate, and I know they have been, they'll continue until either the goal is met or something larger slaps them in the face and says enough. That's my opinion as to what will likely happen. So, and Emery, okay, he's quoting Oprah, talking about false doctrine, utopia doesn't exist. We are the world speech is usually not realistic. No, but it raises money. And that's what that was needed for. It raised money for those that were in need in that particular time. I have no idea if the money got there, if it's been audited, don't know. But it did bring people together for one moment in time. Isn't that another song? Another moment in time. All right, guys, that'll be it. I think we're going to do a little bit of weather in about 12 minutes. I'm so totally a little behind the ball on that one. But thanks for watching. This was show number 50. We'll pick it up on Monday next year. And have a great evening. It's going to be a challenging December. And if we need to address some situations and get some comments from you, we'll do it. We'll do it. All right. Have a great night. Catch you in a little bit. In the meantime, please, it's free. Just keep looking up.